It has been nearly 2 months since devastating flooding really hit Texas very hard. And I want to, just thank you so much for joining me today. We have a lot to break down here. Let's just start with how the communities are holding up down there. The media has sort of moved on in many ways, and yet the pain is very real. How are things going down there?
Well, first of all, Billy, thank you for the opportunity to be with you and share with your listeners all that the Salvation Army is involved in Kirk County. Certainly it is 2 months after the devastating floods have taken place. And, we're still in a state of recovery. Our community suffered so many lost lives. And, people are grieving the deaths that have taken place. But also, the homes that have been damaged, some of them all the way down to the foundation. And so for us, really, as we have moved from, emergency operations, we're now into assisting people with cash assistance to help them in the interim. And shortly, we'll be moving into our longer term phase to assist people who just really still today are in need.
Take us through the extent of that need, because I think people will often look at a situation like this and they will say, okay, we understand people, they don't have the items they need. They don't have access to their homes. They maybe lost their homes in this. But there is a whole psychological, spiritual component to the need that is created when an event like this happens. Can you help us understand the gravity of that?
Sure. When the flooding first took place, the Salvation Army was there on the first day, actually the morning of around 7 a.m. And from that, our canteens went to the very first location, which was a reunification place where as people were leaving the floodwaters, they had identified an area where families could reunite as they were found, or as law enforcement helped them to get out of their homes. And so we were called to be at that location and to comfort people, not only with drinks and food that we had and were quickly donated to us to do that, but certainly one of the big parts that the Salvation Army offers in our emergency assistance is that of pastoral and spiritual care to individuals. And so from that aspect, we had pastors on the ground and folks who, even before disasters take place, are trained in how to comfort people and share the love of Jesus with individuals, especially in tragedies like this. And, it really is individually, layered as to, what through discussions we find survivors in. And so for some, it's, just reassuring them in God's love and providential care through prayer. Oftentimes it's, people who have lost everything just are trying to process that. And so, we're listening to them and trying just to encourage them, that God's got this. And certainly there is great loss, but we also serve a great God. And so for many, it's just layered depending on the trauma that they served. We experienced people who lost everything, not only, their house itself, and some, as far as rescues, I understand over 800 people were rescued by first
Wow.
responders, either by boat or helicopter. And so, that is in itself just a traumatic experience to having to be life flighted like that just to higher ground. But also you had, the loss of those that, their kids or their parent did not make it out. And so, you're dealing with the physical loss of, what is my tomorrow going to look like, without this support in my life who up until this point has been, with me each and every day. And some of those were on vacation, and so you plan all year, to get away and to be on the river and to enjoy the fireworks that were about to take place on the 4th. And from that, family event that you loaded a car with and you packed all your stuff with and you made plans to get there. And, the unthinkable happens through this flood. And so, with that, it's humbling, but at the same time, we as Christians are blessed, and even in times like this, we can share God's love to those who've been impacted, and certainly for us through our mobile feeding kitchens, and we had 4 that were roving around to the most devastated places to make sure people's physical needs were met with food. We also had pastors and those that have been trained on every one of our kitchens, and they would get off as people were getting their plates and have conversations with them to sort of determine, where they were in their trauma, and then from that, offer not only prayer but a listening ear and the love of Jesus to make sure that they knew they weren't facing this alone. And I think for many, me included, we're not in this alone. God, has wonderful people that he has called up for moments like this to meet the needs of people suffering so much. And as a Salvation Army officer and witnessing the ministry that the Salvation Army provides, not only with food, but with also this pastoral care, it's just wonderful that even in times of crisis, we can find godly people doing godly things to be the hands and feet of Jesus and to meet those needs.
Absolutely. And, that is the most important thing, the physical, the spiritual, but that spiritual element of connecting people into eternal truth, and in the midst of these horrific events, many times people are the most open to hearing that message of hope, and they need it in these moments. Camp Mystic was something that really caught the most attention, I think, in media because of the children at the camp and the counselors and the trauma and the numbers of people. How has it been emotionally for you and the team to deal with the aftermath of that? Because again, like so many news stories, it happens, it's in the news, people are talking about it, and then the public moves on to something else, but the community is very much in that, obviously, in the aftermath and the trauma and the pain that those families are feeling. What has it been like to navigate that?
For me and being with the Salvation Army, we've certainly have responded to numerous disasters all around the country. But because there's a Salvation Army covering every zip code, we're in those locations where, the need is. And so, while the media, is now covering other things, we certainly, are here in Kerrville and the other counties that are affected, still serving each and every day. My day is full still of doing disaster work. And yes, while the waters have receded, there still is a lot of emotional scars of people who still are just trying to get through the day. And, for us, we are just trying to help them and share the love of Jesus, to let them know that and remind them that, we can get through today, that Jesus is with us, and that there is hope for tomorrow. And, while we are in that recovery stage, and for some, it's very different. It's different if you lost a child and the grieving that takes place, versus someone who may have had, significant damage, but yet their loved ones are still with them. And so, people are at different places and stages. And, the Salvation Army is prepared to meet people where they are and to help them through that stage. And so, we really don't know on a day-to-day basis, the individuals that we're going to be working with. But we do know God does. And it's not an accident that, those meetings take place. And we're blessed to be a part of a response. And I believe you're right in that our community right now is just is in a place where we are open because of this tragedy to the goodness of God. And I'm a part of a group with those who not only continue to pray, but we're looking at, how can the church not only today, but long term, meet the needs going forward. And, yes, we were there the day and moment just after these floods took place, but the Salvation Army is planning to be there long term and to meet the needs as long as, we are able to with and has until the need has gone away and has been met with our response. And so we're looking, potentially long term for a couple of years if needed to help people rebuild. Certainly, it's not going to be the house that you had, because of the memories that are tied to that which is lost. But with that rebuild also comes once again a renewing that even in my tragedy, the goodness of people and those that have come to assist during this disaster have helped me to see exactly how good people can be, and being a part of the Christian faith, it just allows us, because we know, not only mentally but in our heart, that even in this devastation, God can be found.
Absolutely. And so seeing that openness is encouraging among people who, they're dealing with the unthinkable. I want to ask you this because we obviously have seen the images, we've read the stories, we know you're seeing it firsthand down there, what is still happening in the aftermath of all of that. Have you heard any, and maybe you haven't, but I did want to ask this, any stories that you would consider miraculous, things that have happened where you've seen God's hand even in rescuing and saving lives and helping in the rebuilding of lives after that horrific event?
Billy, there's stories that would just take your breath of how God has been there in people's lives, and they testify that only God could have got them through this situation. We have someone that is sharing that the Salvation Army, came a part of, where her house went over her, and she walked away with an injury to a knee. But I can't even imagine what that experience would even be like. And certainly there are folks who, they're in their house as their house is moving. It comes upon a tree and rest. And so, people are breaking out windows to get out. And it's just amazing that, as a community, even though this happened, because there are a lot of people who aren't near this river who are touched by the weather but haven't gone through the trauma, who have stepped up and helped the Salvation Army so that we're able to help people, in that time of need. But, for me, just even the heartbreaking news, as you shared, with the children, the girls that were in Mystic, even as they're being rescued in a bus, they're singing praise songs of how God is good to them, even in the midst of tragedy. And, I can't imagine anything more beautiful than someone who has faced this and yet knows deep in their heart, as they are crying out and singing to the Lord, the first thing that comes is praising Him in their moment. And so, certainly as a church, and, even individually as a pastor, it just brings me such comfort to know that that has taken place with people who are facing so much.
It's it really is moving. And when I saw that, that they were singing those praise songs, I thought, my goodness, this is faith, right? We don't often get to see these moments in the media. And so it was powerful to see that. If people want to be involved and help the Salvation Army, help those there in the community who still need it, where can they go to do that?
Certainly the Salvation Army is multifaceted in where we are in the operation. So we still right now are giving away financial assistance. And so people can help us by going to helpsalvationarmy.org. And, they can help us in the financial stage in which we're still in. For those homes that were lost, people are through the Salvation Army, finding locations, and we're helping them and assisting them with Airbnbs and apartment complexes and hotels. So there are costs that are being provided to them to get them somewhere temporary and safe. And so, a financial donation is what's needed for that. But we are going to be here for the long term. And so that means, helping individuals where there are gaps with their insurance, or they may not even had flood coverage, which are many people who didn't, depending on where they were in the floodplain. And so we're going to be there helping people in those gaps of how to rebuild their homes. And and there's a lot involved with that. We need help with resources to buy washers and dryers and refrigerators and dishwashers. Many of us think, and we donate clothes and other household items because we have them quickly. But when you are getting in a new house and you've lost everything, the list is long of what's needed to really start. And so, a financial gift to help salvationarmy.org so that we're able to continue to do that for the long term going in is what would be most helpful.
Well, I so appreciate you breaking this down and talking with us today. There's so many elements to this, and people can be praying there for the community, for the work that you're doing and helping people rebuild. We don't want to forget when these events happen and the media moves on that the Salvation Army and other organizations are not moving on. You are very much there with the people, and we appreciate your time and the work that you do.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share, knowing that has me in the palm of his hand and has called me, to in times like this, to help usher in the hands and feet of Christ to those that need it most. And certainly, for the church, this is an opportunity for us to share in the blessings that we have to then bless other people. And so, God's got this, and we're thankful for those of faith who truly understand where we are in the realm of being a Christian and our response in times of trouble.
Well, that is, so important, living out the commandment, love God and love others. And you guys are doing that so beautifully. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Billy.